Fellas, y'all remember when stasis was at its peak and we needed a way to counter it? Stasis was literally rampant everywhere inside of the Crucible, but lo and behold, an exotic was bestowed upon us called the Path of Burning Steps. It was the counter to stasis. Now, we've been a fan for this exotic for a very long time. We've utilized it in countless builds, both in PvP and inside of PvE. And since its release in Season of the Splicer, it has been a very strong choice all the way up until this season. Now keep in mind, Path of Burning Steps wasn't the absolute craziest or most meta armor piece by any means. It was a solid pick. And if you wanted to play into any solar builds on Titan, its exotic perk Firewalker allowed you to do that, stating that solar final blows periodically grant you an escalating damage to weapon damage. Now at one time, that damage buff could amp all the way to 40% just with Firewalker. Now when you combine this with solar surges after Lightfall's release, you could crank that number up even further than that, up to 70 to 71% increase in damage inside of PvE. Not only to your weapon damage, but to your Scorch and Ignition damage as well. We actually covered this in our video with Path of Burning Steps and Polaris Lance right after Lightfall's release, and it was popping off. But by no means did anyone say it was OP. It was simply a powerful exotic. Today, guys, I want to talk about something that has actually been plaguing all of Destiny, and that's simply our exotics, both new and old, just don't seem powerful. And if something is slightly too powerful or out of band, Bungie deals with it. We've made countless builds here with Path of Burning Steps, whether it was with Merciless or Sunshot or even Vex Mythoclast, and at no point in any of those builds did we feel that Path of Burning Steps was an outlier in the meta. It was just a great option that helped a ton of solar builds that, to be quite frank, since the rework for Solar 3.0, those solar builds needed Path of Burning Steps. Anybody miss Sun Warrior? Exactly. I missed that buff so bad. But Path of Burning Steps was that one last holdout for our favorite solar builds, both in PvE and inside of PvP. Even inside of PvP, Path used to be able to grant you a 20% damage buff at one stack of Firewalker. 2 stacks would grant 25%, and 3 and 4 stacks are a little buggy, but essentially capped out at 35%. These were great damage numbers, which was like the equivalent of like kill clip or multi-kill clip to any of your solar weapons. But with patch 7.1.0, in the release of Season of the Deep, Path of Burning Steps was changed so that it uses the non-stacking weapon damage bonuses used by Surge mods. Now, they stated that it can go all the way up to tier 4 damage bonus, granting a damage bonus in PvE of 25%, but only granting a 6% bonus to weapon damage in PvP. And that's exactly what we see in the game today, guys. With Minor Multi-Tool at base, we're hitting 1,567 per headshot, and at solar weapon boost times 1, it goes up to 1,724 damage, which is the equivalent of what a Surge mod would provide at that 10% bonus. This trend essentially continues, matching that of Surge mods until the final stack, where it exceeds that 22% bonus to now 25%. Now, while this is kind of cool, since it can stack with other buffs like Radiance, there's still one major issue that stands out. With the lowered damage output and the loss of the ability to stack Path with weapon surges, Path of Burning Steps has lost a lot of potential damage output. And it's not even just these weapons directly. Anything that included things like weapon ignitions that were combined with Path of Burning Steps. We had a Polaris Ignition build, which scaled our ignition damage up. Now that Path's damage potential has been brought down, and it no longer stacks with Surge mods, your potential boost that you can give to your ignitions is now capped at 25%. I cannot stress enough how big of a nerf this actually is, which is why we're making this video. I know to my Hunter mains and my Warlock mains, you're like, so what, Cross? Boo-hoo. One of your favorite exotics in the Titan class got nerfed. Don't think it's not happening to you. Trust me, there are many examples, Hunters and Warlocks, where this has already been occurring all around you. And the PvP nerf is even worse. Path of Burning Steps was gutted. You want to know why so many people are rocking Antaeus wards? It's because options like Path of Burning Steps is getting wrecked. Inside of PvP, Path of Burning Steps matches your damage boost from Surge mods. At one stack of solar weapon boosts, you get 3% more damage. Guys, that's practically nothing. And keep in mind that you only have around a 50% chance to get a stack of this buff for each takedown you get in PvP. 2 stacks will get you 4.4% damage. Wow! 3 stacks get you a whopping 5.5% damage buff, and if you're able to even get to 4 stacks, fellas, don't worry, it's worth the journey. You have 6% more damage. Now keep in mind, you do automatically get max stacks when you break out of stasis, but come on, how many people are still rocking stasis? No one is going to use this exotic. At one time, it had a place place in PvP. No longer. And what blows my mind is that there are other options out there that are really good, that don't require a kill to proc. Take Empowering Rifts on Sanguine for Warlocks. I'm literally running around one-tapping with Ariana's Vow. God forbid we have an exotic on Titans that may make us look away from Antaeus Wards or Peacekeepers. At one time, we did. And as a Hammer main for years, it's literally in my profile, the last Hammer Titan. It is so hard being a Hammer Titan right now inside of PvP, all because of systematic changes to Solar itself, and then subsequent nerfs to exotics that simply elevated those Solar builds. So to put it simply, guys, these boots are in a much worse spot than they were before. I know, on paper, patch notes sounded like it was a buff. It sounded good. Tier 4 boost? Wow, that sounds hot. No, even if you were to go in there and stack it with things like Radiant of a total damage boost of 56% inside of PvE, that's still nearly 20% less damage than it did before. This is what blows my mind, because a nerf like this was not done because of PvP. Literally no one was saying Path of Burning Steps was OP in either PvE or PvP. But this is not Destiny 1 anymore, where these sandbox changes are blanket changes, that when you actually nerf said exotic or weapon, this also had an effect in both PvE and in PvP. And way back when, PvE players used to blame PvP players every time a nerf would go out, and rightfully so. Bungie did not know how to separate the sandboxes. But D2, we've been doing this for years. Bungie's able to go in there and surgically change an exotic in both PvE and PvP. They made this change intentionally, not for any other reason. And we bring this up because Bungie just talked about how they go about nerfing things and buffing things and changing things. We did a breakdown of a podcast that had Bungie on, and it was a great podcast, truly. Lots of great information. But they brought up a ton of statistics, really just diving in to the data that they use when finding things that are out of band. And so I have to ask, which one of those data points said that Path of Burning Steps was OP and that it needed this nerf? Guys, in my opinion, this is an issue that has actually been creeping up on a lot of exotics. This is exactly why you don't get excited about any of these new exotics that come out every single season. None of these exotic armor pieces excites you anymore. Take Point Contact Cannon Brace. Came out, was literally garbage. Yes, it's much better now, but it took Bungie until this year to buff this exotic. Take Trident Vice, Hunter Garments. For once, Hunters were going to be able to use glaives that could rival that of the power of a Titan. Well, guess what? Bungie killed off glaives, and in doing so, killed off any potential exotics that you hoped would synergize here. Listen, we're not asking for every exotic to be a banger, but for the love of God, Cadmus Ridge Lance Cap is not exciting. Bungie has maintained that every exotic that has come out over the past few years are marginal buffs with little to no excitement under the umbrella of balance, and I got to say, guys, I just don't care. I don't care. Bungie's way of amplifying things is by slapping on an artifact mod that comes around once every other season, and that's what's going to amplify your build. When back in the day, it would be amplified from the exotic itself. Path of Burning Steps is a great example of an exotic that did something very special. It required you to play a certain way and to use a certain weapon type, but it made those solar weapons potent, especially solar weapons that could spawn ignitions and scorch. But this season, it was destroyed. Guys, I'm bringing this up because honestly, exotics just don't excite me anymore. At this point, I feel like Bungie has just decided that this is going to be the parameters of their PvE sandbox, and everything just has to play within that space. I miss the days when exotics felt truly exotic. Dude, I jumped for joy when One Eye Mass finally dropped for me in Forsaken. Why? Because I was about to wreck everybody inside of PvP with One Eye Mass. And that we did. It was nuts. Actually, probably too nuts. Bungie toned it down, but in that moment, it was beautiful. And you felt the thrill when that exotic finally dropped on you. I don't know if it's because exotics are just so plentiful these days. Bungie's really increased the drops here. I don't know if it's because we're allowed to target loot things now. But overall, the exotics themselves just don't feel that special. And even the exotics that do feel special, like Path of Burning Steps, eventually get nerfed. At some point, Bungie, you've got to make us excited for exotics. You got to make them powerful. And yes, this may require you to make some of the in-game content in Destiny a tad bit more difficult and perhaps a tad bit more challenging. And that's all right. I would rather the content be more difficult, but have an exotic that truly feels powerful. I'm tired of the marginal increases in lethality. I'm tired of looking at my exotics in my vault and just not being that excited about what I'm going to be using that day. Thankfully, we don't have to wait long for another batch of exotic refreshes. Bungie plans on releasing an article this week outlining a new pass of changes coming to underused exotic armor next season. I'd expect some major buffs along with a few nerfs. However, after all the changes hit in a few weeks, hopefully more of our exotics actually begin to feel exotic. Fellas, that is my thoughts on Path of Burning Steps, but more importantly, on the state of exotics right now. Can you make potent builds? Yes. Have we seen exotics, even over this past season, get buffed, like Eternal Warrior and a few others within our vault that have been completely left behind? You have, and I'm happy to see those changes. What I'm not happy about is that when we take an exotic that has such a niche use, that requires so many specifics, and we kill it literally for no reason. After already nerfing the subclass that it synergizes with, I can't help but wonder, are we actually being allowed to play the way we want to play? Or instead, are we simply being allowed to play the way Bungie wants us to play? Just my thoughts, guys. Fellas and ladies, thank you all for coming and watching, and as always,
slap that like button like your mama told you right.